Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cracking open a story that looks like simple, big tech news on the surface,
Right.
but it's actually one of the most insightful masterclasses in enterprise AI strategy we've seen all year. I'm talking about Apple's reported multi-year deal to integrate Google's Gemini models into, well, a completely rebuilt Siri.
That's a huge deal.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're not just here to talk about the massive financial scale of the partnership.
Though that is massive.
It is. But our real mission for you, the listener, is to treat this whole thing as a case study. I mean, if Apple, a company famous for controlling every single chip, every line of code a company, our sources say, has brutal requirements.
That's the word for it. Brutal.
If they're choosing an external AI brain, then understanding why they chose it and how they're integrating it offers an incredibly valuable lens for your own organization,
Yeah.
especially if you're building out an AI strategy right now.
That is the perfect way to frame it. This is so much more than a headline. For years, Apple has been seen as, well, trying to catch up in the generative AI race.
Playing catch up for sure.
Exactly. And by picking Google's models to be the core driver for the next version of Siri, they are fundamentally moving the center of gravity for how their entire ecosystem delivers intelligence. It's a quiet but absolutely meaningful shift in their whole AI stack.
And what's so fascinating is how quickly that center of gravity has shifted. I mean, it wasn't long ago that the big news was Apple integrating OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Right, into the iPhone experience directly.
Yes, and that was positioned as more of a power tool, something the user would specifically call on for a big task.
That original OpenAI move was purely pragmatic. It was a signal to the market saying, look, we need to ship powerful generative AI now.
We can't wait.
We can't wait, even if it means relying on a market leader. They were basically bolting on a superpower. But this Gemini shift, it changes the underlying architecture completely. Well, now Google's models are positioned to be the fundamental engine, the foundational, the default layer that powers Siri's day-to-day functions. It's handling everything from quick little interactions to much more complex contextual stuff.
So hang on, ChatGPT is still there, right? It's available for those really advanced queries. So what's the real difference here? Why is the Gemini role so much more important?
Because the default sets the tone. It sets the entire experience, the core intelligence that handles your everyday what's the weather requests, that understands your context, that powers those rapid low latency responses.
That's Gemini now.
That's Gemini now. ChatGPT is still there, sure, as an option for those bigger, more complex queries. But it's no longer the foundational engine. And that decision by Apple to elevate Gemini to that core default layer, well, it's a huge reputational endorsement for Google in the market. It's a massive technical vote of confidence.
It says they believe Gemini is just the more reliable, scalable, and controllable choice for the day-to-day grind.
Exactly. The default choice.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, especially for anyone listening who's involved in enterprise procurement. How did Apple actually decide?
Right.
When you're an organization selecting a foundation model, you face this list of criteria that is incredibly hard to satisfy all at once. In Apple's public language, it's all about capabilities first, not just the convenience of the deal.
Absolutely. They look at what the model can do under real extreme pressure. If we strip away all the marketing, we can pretty much boil down Apple's evaluation to 5 brutal requirements. And crucially, these are the exact same requirements you should be using for your organization.
Okay, let's walk through them. Because if any one of these fails, the whole system just crumbles. What's number 1?
Number 1, performance at scale. It is not enough to be the fastest in some lab benchmark with 20 users.
Right.
The question is, can the model hold that high quality? The accuracy, the relevance, the speed under massive, sustained, real-world usage. Apple operates on a scale that is it's hard to comprehend. 1 billion devices asking questions at the same time.
So any model that degrades under that kind of load is, well, it's useless to them.
Totally useless. It's not just speed, it's consistency under global stress.
And what about the immediate user experience? The feeling of it?
That leads directly into number 2, low latency inference. This is critical. The response has to be so fast, it feels completely native inside a core product like Siri.
Like it's part of the operating system?
Precisely. If the answer takes 2 or 3 seconds to come back, the user experience is broken. The user feels like Siri is thinking too hard, they give up, and the feature fails. Apple needs responses in milliseconds, not seconds.
Which brings us to requirement 3. We know modern AI isn't just about text anymore.
Correct. Requirement 3 is multimodal strength. The system has to seamlessly handle text, images, voice, context, all kind of mashed together. Siri isn't just reading you an email. It needs to understand, what is this photo I just took, and can you draft a caption for it in a funny tone?
Right, it has to understand the world through multiple inputs at once.
Yes. And Google, with their history and search and mapping, they arguably had a bit of a leg up in proving that end-to-end multimodal capability.
Okay, and the fourth one. This is the technical one that I think has massive governance implications for anyone listening in the enterprise space.
Yes. That's hybrid deployment. This is a critical architectural choice. The ability to run some things, the lightweight, fast stuff, partly on the device itself.
On chip?
On the chip. And then shift the heavier, more complex requests seamlessly to the cloud, all without the user even noticing. For any organization dealing with sensitive PII or IP, this hybrid model is, well, it's non-negotiable. It determines where your data is being processed.
And finally, the one Apple is most famous for.
Of course. Number 5, privacy and governance. The model has to meet the absolute strictest data handling standards across billions and billions of interactions. For Apple, this is table stakes. If you can't guarantee robust audited governance and privacy, the conversation just stops. Performance doesn't even enter the equation.
That hybrid deployment piece feels like the linchpin for control. But I think our sources highlighted a really specific, easy-to-miss advantage Google had that went beyond just pure technical benchmarks.
It did. It's about trust, really, or at least reduced risk. Google already had massive consumer-scale deployment proof because Gemini is already integrated into major Android experiences.
They'd already been through the fire, so to speak.
Exactly. They weren't starting from scratch. And while Apple's scale is unique, that prior evidence reduces the integration risk dramatically. When you're wiring AI into a product used by a billion people, you want to reduce the number of unknowns. Google had proven they could thrive in that deeply integrated OS context.
So if they had a working pragmatic integration with OpenAI, why elevate a different provider so soon? I mean, this pivot just raises so many questions about timing. It seems technically messy and probably very expensive.
It is expensive, no doubt. But the timing is the key insight into how Apple is thinking strategically. The most plausible answer here is provider velocity.
How fast they're moving.
How fast they're moving. The whole model landscape is evolving so incredibly quickly that last year's best choice, or even last quarter's, might not stay the best choice for the multi-year path they need to bet on.
So Apple isn't just buying the Gemini of today.
Exactly. This multi-year agreement is a huge, calculated bet on Google trajectory, on their sustained R&D investment, their iteration speed, and their ability to keep supporting Apple's brutal operational demands over the long haul.
So they're betting on who will be leading the race 2 or 3 years from now, not just who topped a benchmark last week.
That's the game they're playing.
But isn't that inherently risky? Betting on an external provider's trajectory, especially for a company like Apple that, loves to control its own stack, this feels like a massive vulnerability they're accepting.
Oh, it's a huge risk. And for the listener building an enterprise solution, this is the scariest part. Vendor concentration. For Apple, the risk is amplified because now you have Google influencing the core AI experience across both major mobile ecosystems.
Android directly and now iOS indirectly.
And that fear is a perfect mirror for enterprise procurement. When you standardize on a single foundation model provider, you immediately expose yourself to some pretty significant dependency risks.
Okay, so what do those risks actually look like in the real world?
Well, first, there's pricing leverage. You might get a great deal on day one, but as your product becomes more and more dependent, your vendor gains massive leverage. They can force unplanned cost increases down the line.
You're locked in.
You're locked in. Second, roadmap risk becomes your risk. Imagine you build your entire HR tool on vendor X's image generation, but then they decide to pivot to text analysis.
And they stop investing in images.
Exactly. Your whole product roadmap is instantly derailed. Third, you have technical lock-in. The tooling, the data formats, the safety layers, they can become incredibly expensive and difficult to swap out. And finally, maybe the most subtle risk is that your product's voice starts to inherit the provider's quirks and biases. It gets harder to differentiate.
So knowing all those risks, the architecture, how Apple chose to deploy this, becomes maybe the most important part of the story. For anyone handling sensitive data or IP, this blueprint is gold.
I agree. It's not just about what model they chose, but how they chose to deploy it to mitigate those very risks we just talked about.
You said it before, it's a governance strategy.
It is. Apple's hybrid model is often framed as technical elegance, but it's fundamentally a governance and risk mitigation strategy. And this layered blueprint, it maps perfectly to complex enterprise needs, especially in, say, finance or healthcare.
So let's break down that triple layered approach.
Okay, so first you have the on-device component, or, the on-premise equivalent for an enterprise. This is for the most sensitive actions and quick interactions.
Yeah.
The data never leaves your control.
Maximum control meets all the legal requirements for data residency.
Exactly. Then you have the second layer, the private cloud. This handles heavier requests that still need strict governance, but require more compute power. The data is still managed on your terms.
In the final layer.
And finally, you have the frontier cloud calls, the public internet endpoints. And those are only used when the user specifically opts in, or when the task absolutely requires it, like fetching real-time web data. This architecture dictates exactly where data flows and who owns the risk at every single step.
And we can't really talk about reducing friction without pointing out the elephant in the room, the existing relationship. Google and Apple have been sharing the same couch for years with that massive search deal.
Precisely, that deeply intertwined business history, it likely lowered the friction for this deal tremendously. The technical integration, the contracting, the support expectations, it's a perfect mirror for how long-standing vendors often get a huge advantage in enterprise procurement.
Even if they aren't the absolute top scorer on a benchmark.
Right. Trust and established pipelines grease the wheels far more than a single percentage point on a test.
And this rapid shift, it really signals that leadership and foundation models can be real, but it can also be very, very temporary. When a massive distribution partner like Apple picks a new default, it shapes billions of user habits and can shift the entire market.
Which brings us to the most practical, immediate takeaway for you, the listener. Avoid getting locked in by accident. Even if you choose a primary provider today, the #1 priority has to be building your stack so that switching is at least possible down the road.
Possible, or at least bearable.
Or at least bearable, yes, because the market will flip again.
So what are the actual architectural practices people need to adopt to enable that flexibility? It sounds technical, but it's really a business requirement, isn't it?
It is entirely a business requirement. First, you need to build in abstraction layers. Your application logic can't be tied directly to one vendor's proprietary API.
You can swap out the engine underneath without rewriting everything.
Exactly. You also need multi-model routing. This lets you test and compare different vendors on the fly, running small shadow tests to see if the market has shifted. Your prompts need to be portable, and you need evaluation suites that aren't tied to one vendor.
And the most critical part, the one people always overlook, the data.
Oh, absolutely. Your data and your logging formats cannot be proprietary. If you decide to switch, you can't have your old vendor holding your performance data and your failure logs hostage in some unique format you can't read. You have to own your data stack. That is the ultimate lock-in avoidance strategy.
And looking ahead, Google has indicated that Gemini could power more than just the Siri refresh. Potentially additional Apple Intelligence features over time.
Which means the scope could expand.
And as the scope expands, the dependencies get deeper, and those switching costs we just talked about get, well, maybe prohibitively high?
That's the risk.
Yeah.
So to summarize this whole deep dive, Apple's move doesn't mean Gemini is the right answer for every company.
Not at all.
But it does provide a really strong signal about what enterprise-grade selection looks like when the requirements are truly brutal. Speed, scale, and a foundational emphasis on privacy delivered through that hybrid deployment model.
The ultimate lesson here isn't pick the vendor Apple picked. The lesson is to adopt the exact same decision lens. Focus ruthlessly on governance, speed, and hybrid deployment, and then most importantly, design your architecture so that you are not stuck if the leaderboard flips again in a year or two.
Well said.
And here's the provocative thought that's still the missing piece in all of this. Pricing. Large-scale model licensing and inference economics are still, they're still fundamentally evolving. A deal of this size between these two titans will influence how future enterprise contracts get structured everywhere, even if the actual numbers never go public.
It sets a precedent.
It sets a massive precedent. So what will the Apple and Google contract structure reveal about the true cost and the future structure of AI licensing for everyone else? That's what you should be thinking about as you plan your budget.